Bart, I don't want to alarm you, but...
You don't need to be a nuclear scientist to understand what happened at Chernobyl. You only need to know this. There are essentially two things that happen inside a nuclear reactor. The reactivity which generates power either goes up or it goes down. All the operators do is maintain balance. Uranium fuel. As uranium atoms split apart and collide, reactivity goes up. But if you don't balance the reactivity, it never stops rising. So, boron control rods. They reduce reactivity like brakes on a car. But there's a third factor to consider: water. Cool water takes heat out of the system. As it does, it turns to steam, or what we call a void. In an RBMK reactor of the type used at Chernobyl, there's something called a positive void coefficient. What does that mean? It means that the more steam present within the system, the higher the reactivity, which means more heat, which means more steam, which means it would appear we have a vicious cycle on our hands. And we would, were it not for this, the negative temperature coefficient. When nuclear fuel gets hotter, it gets less reactive. So fuel increases reactivity. Control rods and water reduce it. Steam increases it. The rise in temperature reduces it. This is the invisible dance that powers entire cities without smoke or flame. And it is beautiful when things are normal. As uranium splits apart to release energy, it breaks down into a new element, xenon. Xenon reduces reactivity. This is the poison Comrade Homer mentioned. When the core is running at full power, it burns the xenon away before it can cause a problem. But because of the delay, Chernobyl Reactor 4 has been held at half power for 10 hours. The xenon did not burn away. It built up, poisoning the core. We're starting to lose balance. At 28 minutes past midnight, the reactor is now primed to slow down. And yet, in less than an hour, it will explode. If you can't understand how a stalled nuclear reactor could lead to an explosion, I don't blame you. After all, you don't work in the control room of a nuclear power plant. But as it turned out, the men who didn't understand it either. The time is 38 past midnight. The reactor is nearly shut down. The operators of Reactor 4 are locked on a path that leads directly to disaster. There's no way to turn back. They do not yet know it, but the die is cast. At 30 megawatts, xenon is still being created, but none of it is burning away. The reactor is drowning in poison. To make matters worse, the reactor isn't hot enough to produce sufficient steam. The only way to safely raise power from this state is to do it very, very slowly over the course of 24 hours. But Dyatlov wants it done now. Akimov and Toptonov have only one course of action. They begin pulling control rods out. Dozens at a time. Halfway out, three-quarters of the way out. Still, the power does not budge. So they begin pulling them all the way out. There were 211 control rods in Reactor 4. Akimov and Toptonov completely withdrew 205. Remember, control rods are the brakes on this car. Of 211 rods, only 6 now remain in the reactor. As for the fuel, it's gone cold, so the negative temperature coefficient is no longer weighing down the reactivity. But even still, the xenon poisoning is so strong, the best they can do is raise the power to 200 megawatts. The control rods are out, the emergency system has been disconnected, the only thing keeping the reactor in check is water and xenon. It's 1 in the morning, the test is minutes away. They may as well have had 15 days. The problem they were facing was not solvable. The power was too low, the water was too high. The test was already ruined. The results would have been useless, but Dyatlov didn't care. All he wanted to do was report a completed test. 1:22 a.m. Less than 2 minutes remain. Yuvchenko, the mechanical engineer, is in his office. Perevozchenko, reactor section foreman, is in the refueling hall, high above the 1,000-ton steel reactor cover. Diktayenko, Podemchuk, circulation operators are in the pump room. None of them have been told about the test. None of them know what is about to happen. At 1:22 and 30 seconds, Toktanov sees a report from the reactor's Scala computer system. Based on the absence of sufficient control rods, the computer is recommending that the reactor be shut down. 1:23 and 4 seconds. With every decision, they have pulled this reactor back like a slingshot, further than anyone has ever pulled. Now the test begins. The pumps are shut down, and they've let go. The pumps stop moving water through the reactor. Uranium fuel is now unchecked by fresh coolant, unchecked by control rods. The balance immediately swings in the opposite direction. In less than a second, reactivity increases. Inside the core, the remaining water is quickly converting to steam. A void is being created. There is no fresh water to replace it. Steam increases reactivity, increases heat, increases steam, increases reactivity. The remaining xenon decays away. The power is rising. There's nothing left to stop it. 1:23 and 40 seconds. In every control room of every nuclear reactor in the world, there is a button with one single purpose: to scram or instantly shut down the reaction. In Soviet reactors, that button is called AZ5. You press AZ5, all of the control rods insert at once, and the reaction is stopped dead. Dyatlov broke every rule we have. He pushed a reactor to the brink of destruction. He did these things believing there was a failsafe. AZ5, a simple button to shut it all down. But in the circumstances he created, there wasn't. The shutdown system had a fatal flaw. At 1:23:40, Akimov engages AZ5. The fully withdrawn control rods begin moving back into the reactor. These rods are made of boron, which reduces reactivity, but not the tips. The tips are made of graphite, which accelerates reactivity. For the same reason, our reactors do not have containment buildings around them, like those in the West. For the same reason, we don't use properly enriched fuel in our cores. For the same reason, we are the only nation that builds water-cooled, graphite-moderated reactors with a positive void coefficient. It's cheaper. The first part of the rods that enter the core are the graphite tips, and when they do, the reaction in the core, which had been rising, skyrockets. Every last molecule of liquid water instantly converts to steam, which expands and ruptures a series of fuel rod channels. The control rods in those channels can move no further. The graphite tips are fixed in position, endlessly accelerating the reaction. Chernobyl Reactor 4 is now a nuclear bomb. 1:23:42. Perevoschenko looks down on the enormous steel lid of the reactor and sees the impossible. The control rod and fuel channel caps, which each weigh 350 kilograms, are jumping up and down. He runs to warn the control room, but there's nothing he can do to stop what is coming. 1:23 and 44 seconds. The steam blows more fuel channels apart. We do not know how high the power went. We only know the final reading. Reactor 4, designed to operate at 3,200 megawatts, went beyond 33,000. The pressure inside the core can no longer be held back. At long last, we have arrived. 1:23:45, explosion. In the instant the lid is thrown off the reactor, oxygen rushes in. It combines with hydrogen and superheated graphite. The chain of disaster is now complete.